Assad told his men his simple equation. If we go to the United States, he said, what is our importance? Israel is number 1. Egypt is number 2. Lebanon is number 3, and Jordan is number 4. Where does Syria stand, he asked, after all of those countries? If we stay with the Soviet Union, he posed, where do we stand? We are the Russians' only major ally on the border with Israel. If we stay with the Soviets, he said, we are their only ally. The choice was a simple one. What happens now? Probably very little. It is only a few months before the American presidential campaign stops any serious diplomatic negotiations in the Middle East. During his recent trip to the region, the new presidential envoy, Robert McFarlane, found out how upset the Arabs really are about U.S. policy. Put simply, the Americans promised to deliver a lasting agreement for the departure of Israeli troops from Lebanon. That hasn't happened. The Americans have paid for their negotiating mistakes with the Syrians. The Assad government has brought the issue back where they want it. There will be no deal unless some of the conditions from Damascus are met. It is unlikely that the Syrians will leave the Bekaa Valley in Lebanon until Israel agrees to a unilateral withdrawal from the country. A simultaneous withdrawal is what the U.S. negotiators should try to convince all the parties to do now. But the next key decision for the United States is how much the Reagan administration will allow the Soviets to become involved in Middle East negotiations. The Syrians are not stalking horses for the Soviets, but they do represent some of the Russian views. In essence, the stakes are now much higher than ever before. The reason is simple. There are American Marines stationed in Beirut. Just 100 miles away in Syria, Russian technicians are manning missile sites. Like it or not, the game is now in the hands of both superpowers. There has been a history in recent years that the U.S. has tried to keep the Soviets out of major decisions in the region. Since 1973, the Americans have been the sole arbiters of Middle East policy, such as the Camp David Accords and the agreement between Lebanon and Israel. That time has passed. The Americans must decide whether to open the door not only to Syria, but to the Soviet Union, if there is a sincere desire for lasting peace in the Middle East. This is Chris Harper. Now back to Bob Walker in New York.
A report on the economy on Perspective after this.
Who says you have to fight City Hall?
Howard K. Smith with a public service message from the Broadcasting Industry Council to improve American productivity. We take you now to Peabody Barnes in Mansfield, Ohio.
We too often think of government as being an adversary of business and labor. But think of the gains that could be made if all three groups could learn to cooperate with each other. To increase productivity, workers at this plant recommended a safe, well-protected street crossing to move goods between a plant and a warehouse. Management asked the city for help. What they expected was red tape, but what they got was the crossing they wanted. The city felt that by helping business, the city would also benefit itself. It is obvious that even in little ways, America works better when we all, business, employees, and government, listen, cooperate, and say to each other, let's work together.
The key to the economy appears to be the interest rate. The interest rate determines to a large extent what we buy or don't buy. In discussing the economy with ABC financial correspondent Philip Greer, I began by asking Phil why interest rates are going up.
The reason, Bob, really is fear. There isn't much in the economic picture to force interest rates up. There are those big government deficits which have a lot of people worried, but $200 billion or so a year for the next few years. But the fact is that nobody else wants to borrow money. Business is not borrowing very much, so there isn't very much pressure. What's happening is people who are going to lend money for 6 months or a year look out that far. They see the economy growing back very fast. They expect a much greater demand for credit later on. They think that business borrowing will run up against government borrowing, and that will force rates up. And so when you're thinking about lending money for 6 months or a year from now, you want to look to protect yourself. And so they want these higher rates in anticipation of what they think is going to come. And it's mainly those big government deficits that scare them, because the government is taking $200 billion or so out of the economy every year for the next few years.
Well, is there a fear that the economy is growing too fast?
Yes, the economy is no doubt rebounding faster than people thought it would, faster than a lot of people would like it to. The GNP report that just came out the other day showed that it was growing even faster than the Commerce Department thought a month ago. That raises these problems. You don't get an economic boom without financing it. You have to borrow money, and it raises these problems of where is all this money going to come from to finance both the economic rebound and the government deficits.
And there's a fear in some quarters that we're going to boom too much, then we'll bust again. Is that it?
That these rates will go up, and it will put a damper on the whole thing, and business will quiet down again. You see, you're talking about a multi-trillion-dollar economy. You don't do things quickly in an economy like that. Once a trend is started, it's very difficult to reverse. It takes a long time. It takes a lot of pain, as we found out over the last couple of years. And so you don't want to get it started if you can avoid it. What they would like to see, and when I say they, I talk about people in Wall Street, bankers, people like Paul Volcker at the Federal Reserve Bank. What they would like to see is a much slower, much steadier rate of growth. The pain of people out of work and so on would not be alleviated much faster. It would be better for them if they went right back to work. But these people are trying to think in terms of something that will last for a long time, something that we've paid a steep price for already, and why not get the benefit of it? And so when you see figures like the ones that have been coming out lately, it really frightens a lot of people, and they worry about the effect it's going to have 6, 8, 10, 12 months down the line. That's why rates stay up. That's why rates keep edging up, not because of anything that's happened now, but because of what they think might very well happen in the next 6 months or so.
Well, can you go out on a limb or whatever? How high are those interest rates likely to go?
Not very high. And the reason not very high, well, let's say the prime rate right now is at 11%. Most guessing puts it at the top. If it gets that high, it's somewhere between 12 and 13%. The reasoning behind that is not all that encouraging, really. The reasoning is that if rates begin to go up a little bit, business is going to quiet down again. When business quiets down, we won't need as much borrowing by business, and so the pressure will come off. And so rates will go up a little bit, and then business won't be interested in borrowing money anymore, and the government can keep on borrowing to finance its deficits. Now, that would keep rates from going up, but remember, I said that business would quiet down. So that those 10 million people or so who aren't working are not going to get back to work so fast.
So higher interest rates then hurt the recovery somewhat.
Absolutely, no question about it. And we aren't very far. There is some room in the economy for business to absorb higher rates, to pay higher rates, and not slow down very much. But we aren't very far, according to what economists tell me, we aren't very far from where they'll stop doing that, from where those rates will begin to hurt.
Well, what's happened to the stock market rally, Phil? We had a year? We've had a year of
record rally, no question about it.
Record rally on Wall Street. Now that seems to have cooled, or it has cooled.
Well, look at it this way. Starting last August, when rates started coming down, the people in Wall Street began to bet on what effect that would have on business. They thought that the lower rates would touch off a rebound and business would go flying along. Business is improving very quickly, but the fact is that it has not backed up the bets that Wall Street's already made. Don't forget the Dow Jones average between last August and this past June was up something over 60%. Business has come back very strongly, but it hasn't come back that strongly. And then added into that is now this question of what's going to happen to interest rates. Will the economy keep going? These people in Wall Street are not as certain now as they were only 3 or 4 months ago. There are a lot of questions now over should we wait a while? Is it going to be slower? The rates that have started going up last May, interest rates actually started edging up last May, are not expected to show up in their effect because, again, this economy is so large, not expected to show up in their effect until the end of this year or early 1984. And so people in Wall Street with this money to invest say, maybe we ought to slow down a little bit. Let's see where things are going before we pump some more money in there because, goodness, we've already made a huge bet on this economy. Why don't we see if the economy lives up to what we've predicted for it?
Well, you're saying that Wall Street then operates a lot like the interest rate structure, that it's a bet. It's a prediction of what's going to happen 6 or 12 months ahead.
Absolutely. That's what they were doing last August. Don't forget the recession. The stock market rally started in August. The recession didn't end until December. I mean, that's not official yet, but the likelihood is it ended in December. So they were betting 6 months ahead then that the economy was going to rebound. They're looking 6 months ahead now. And where they were so certain last August, they are not nearly as certain now. And they already say that, look, we've put this money in. We've sent stocks flying the way they have. Let the economy catch up and pay off for us, and then we'll put some more in.
Well, what's the biggest fear on Wall Street? Same fear the people who set the interest rates? Is that deficit still scaring them again?
Oh, yes. The government deficit, beyond a doubt. $200 billion a year is something in the neighborhood of 75, I forget the number exactly, but it's something in the neighborhood of 75 or 80% of all the savings that are expected to build up over the next year. And so what does that leave for other people who have to borrow it? And I'm not talking, the big borrowing, of course, is in business, but you're also talking about personal borrowing to buy cars, to finance cars, to buy a house, that kind of thing. Mortgage rates have begun to edge up. You'll notice that the automobile companies are phasing out their cheap interest rate deals now. Money is beginning to get more expensive. And the problem is, if the government takes all this with these deficits, what's left? And what do business and people, individuals, do for the financing they're going to need?
Speaking of the government, we're 15 months away or so from a presidential election. What does this mean to Ronald Reagan?
Bob, that seems to change almost every day. I think you asked the Democrats about that a couple months ago, and Reagan was vulnerable, and then the economy started getting so strong, and now Reagan is invulnerable. I don't think there's any way to know. I could give you personal opinions, but they're strictly personal. And I think that the election next year is going to hinge on economics, and I think it's going to be much closer than anybody can think now, because I don't think that the economy, again, personally, is going to be as rip-roaring in November of 1984 as it looks right now. The reason for that is I think there's going to be a dip in the first part of next year or the latter part of this year. And it's going to be, again, take a long time to turn around, to get people back to work. I don't think, essentially, that the unemployment rate's going to come down all that quick. And I think that's the biggest thing that the president has to fear next year. So I would say that it's a horse race. I don't think, I neither write off President Reagan, assuming he runs, nor do I write off whatever Democrat runs against him. I think it's a wide open race, and I think that as time goes on, the economy is going to make it a wide open race.
Well, what can the president do, or the Congress do, to cut the deficits? Everybody seems to agree that the deficit's too big.
Right.
Now, the president has passed his tax cut, 3-year tax cut. Now, that takes revenue away from the government.
Right.
How can you do that on one hand and worry about the deficit on the other hand?
You talk to people in Wall Street, and they all have the same answer. There is no way you can eliminate this deficit or even get it down substantially any time soon. What you can do is you can indicate an intention to do that. You can indicate that we are determined to get the deficit down, whatever it takes. The president hasn't done that, and the reason he hasn't done it is because he's refused to cut the defense budget. Now, that is not, you talk to people downtown, and they tell you that's not to weaken the country. What they're looking for is a signal that even the defense budget, even this sacred cow, is not a sacred cow when it comes to cutting the deficit. And so they'll tell you things like, if he would take $20 billion or $10 billion out of the defense budget, then our worries would begin to ease very quickly, because we would begin to understand that there is an open mind, that there is a determination, that nothing is sacred, and that he's determined to get this deficit down. So what they're looking for is not so much an actual reduction in the deficit as a signal from the White House that it is determined to get the deficit down over the next few years. That's what they haven't gotten so far, and that's why they worry about the deficits going out the next 4 or 5 years. There has been nothing from the White House that says we will do everything we can. The White House has indicated that we will do it in those areas in which we want to do it. Social spending, domestic spending, that kind of thing. But it has not gone into the meat of other things, and it has not given the signal that Wall Street has been looking for, that the deficits will in fact come down.
What about unemployment? What can be done about that? Does that, again, depend on the high interest rates?
High interest rates would no doubt hurt getting people back to work, no doubt make it slower, because it would slow business down. Employment is a very difficult thing, Bob. It's a lagging thing. Employers do not hire new workers so quickly. They want to see business get better first. It's expensive to hire a new employee, and it's more expensive to lay them off 6 months from now or a year from now if you have to. So you don't do that. You schedule more overtime and so on, and you try to work your way through until the economy shows you that you can't do it. That's why it takes a long time to get this down. We've had some great improvements in unemployment over the last couple of months, but they're almost certain to slow down very soon.
Thank you, financial correspondent Philip Greer, and this is Perspective. Perspective reports, analysis, and commentary from our correspondents around the world who work where news is happening. I'll return in a few moments with a look at the civil rights movement in the United States and where it may be headed. Stay tuned for the ABC Information Network. I'm Bob Walker.
You're in touch with 94 FM, WKTI Milwaukee.